Hi, everybody, and welcome. Um, I'm Daniel Tobin. I'm doing the introductions, and if you could just check and quieten your cell phones, that would be a great thing. Okay. What a pleasure it is this evening to introduce the work of these exceptional poets here at this exceptional bookstore, the Grolier. I want to thank James Frazier for asking me to offer these brief introductions and to Carol Minkiti and the Minkiti family for this by now legendary venue for poetry. I'll let you all refer to the poster for the biographies, at least for the most part. I'm going to respond briefly to the work by way of this introduction. In his poem, Wood, originally, Tom Laughlin imagines back into a time the historian of religions Mircea Eliade would have called in illo tempore, or ad origine, the time of origins, of first things, when everything was made of wood, in this case, xylophones, Egyptian pillows, stoves, blankets, cows, roads, vegetables, people, children, and poems. Things aren't like that anymore, the poet Riley wittily observes, but the true wit of the poem, in the original meaning of wit, as in John Donne's work, is to see into the deepest affinity of things through the world's apparent, albeit very real, differences. And he does so with a light touch, as Lloyd Schwartz suggests in his endorsement of Tom Laughlin's latest book of poems, The Rest of the Way. All of Laughlin's poems have that rare poetic gift, deceptively effortless and full of surprises. His words so thoroughly embody whatever he's writing about, you can't help feel that you're living them. It's perhaps unfair to apply one poet's endorsement of another poet's work to yet another poet's work, but Matthew Porto's poems are likewise gifted with surprises and a marvelous presence of embodiment. Take The Angel Descends to Jacob, where right off we get the angel's point of view, the whole of creation's drama before me, the wheel that turns it, but also the very materiality of the earth present part and parcel with the mythological, a serpent waiting for twitchy prey beneath the cedar, such that the angel follows his first human thought like a scent. Moon Grammar, Matthew Porto's debut book of poems, is filled with such moments of original revelation, giving us, as one reviewer wrote, a unique entry into what human life is about, its astonishments, its darknesses, its mysteries, and also, in Robert Pinsky's words, poems that are ingeniously alert, compelling, and unpredictable. At the risk of conflating the work of each of these uniquely gifted poets, yes, you guessed it, the words ingenious, alert, compelling, and unpredictable also apply to the poems of Ryan Wilson, whose most recent book, In Ghostlight, has been called by Dana Gioia virtuosic and dazzling in its formal mastery, from a poet whose imaginative intelligence is, as Rodney Jones praised, at once wild and sensible. By way of example, I'll cite Sharecroppers, which, with astonishingly felt precision and the most vital kind of prospective memory, conjures the fog of generations that obscures my people now, dark silhouettes looming enormous in imagination's unearthly fields where what the land forgets persists. Are we not back again here to that liminal place, absent from us, but somehow exerting its own commanding nearness in illo tempore, ab origine? Each original time seems always indelibly, maybe even only one's own, unless it can be made present through those deeper pervasive affinities where, as Ryan Wilson's poem tells us by its end, time has no claim. If the poet can take us there, these poets take us there. Please join me in welcoming Tom Laughlin, Matthew Porto, and Ryan Wilson.
Thank you, Dan, for that kind introduction. And thank you, James, for inviting me and for creating this environment at this storied Grolier that has made it so much more vibrant in the last few years. I'm excited to be reading here at the Grolier with Matthew Porto and Ryan Wilson. And thank you, everyone who has shown up tonight on this sweltering summer evening, as well as for those who have tuned in virtually, perhaps beside a pool somewhere, hopefully. I'll be reading mostly from my book, The Rest of the Way, and mostly summer-related poems to fit this July evening. I want to provide a trigger warning for the first and third poem. I grew up in the small town of Topsfield, Massachusetts, up on the North Shore, and as a young teen, I worked for a couple of summers on a farm in Boxford. This first poem is called Early Lessons. Early Lessons. I remember a pig chewing on the back of a live chicken on a farm when I was 14. Kicked out of its coop at midday by my pitchfork scraping the crusty floor, it climbed into the pig stall, looking for shade from the yard's burning heat. Patty came quickly, the dogs barking behind, following my frantic sprint to grab the still blinking chicken from grunting snouts. Too far gone, he spun it by the neck, then held it out to flutter, jerk, then hang limp from his hand. And another animal poem about a very different ecosystem. Great White. I know motion. Moving is what I do, like the depths of blue-green dancing scents along my smooth sides, teasing this gnawing within my belly. There is never choice, only motion, desire, and sense that pull me faster, the ecstasy of conquest, a union of sorts, of life and blood, pungent taste of flesh. And yet the hunger returns again and again, the search, the motion. At times I've resisted, waited, ignored the pangs, watched as others partook, felt disgust at the sight. Yet there is pride in this jaw, these teeth, and what I am built for in this world. Strength, speed, and even a grace of sorts, though few see this in me. The shocking horrors that we've been seeing in Gaza and Ukraine and Sudan and elsewhere remind us of the devastation of war and the trauma that affects generations. In World War II, the US infantry rifle was the M1 Garand with cartridges that kicked off to the right. It was designed for right-handed soldiers. Left-handed soldiers, the cartridge would go in front of their face, perhaps hit them in the face, and left-handed soldiers were in a company selected and trained often to use a flamethrower, which is a horrible weapon that shoots a flame 45 yards and burns everything in its path. Flamethrower. A lefty, the guns weren't made for him, so he became a flamethrower, flushing out foxholes that couldn't be cleared. Children on fire still ripped through his dreams, forcing him down to the kitchen chair at 3 a.m. for a cigarette, highball, and late movie. I knew only hatred then, standing below that bald leather head, slapped in the face with the crooked fingers of his open hand. Dead buddies, malaria, teeth knocked in, words shouted into arguments too often to sting when intended, burn years later for a flamethrower's son. I love listening to jazz, and I'm interested in the interplay between musicians, the sense of joy and what is created, but also the playful competition between musicians as they take turn on solos. I wanted to capture that somehow in a poem for years. And I was driving one August night, listening to Eric in the Evening on WGBH radio. And the opening lines of this poem came to me. Here. It is called Jazz. Dancing boy, dancing girl, and a boy again tiptoeing on the wooden raft, circling as it sways. He circles and it sways in the stillness of the creek, around and to the diving board where he rattles and thumps and springs, twirling, floating up and out and curving down to slice, then splash, then explode up and out, splashing, shouting, laughing at the moon, swirling in the hot summer dusk, thrashing and kicking with smiling wetness before climbing the ladder to sit back, smile, and watch to see the girl tiptoe on the swaying dock, circle, no, not circle, almost circle to the edge, then almost circle again as the creek stills, ripples slightly. Anticipation. Her footsteps pat the dampened wood. She finds the worn wooden board, bobs up, rattles, and slaps, running to take that board, bending, springing as part of the swing of her arms, soaring upward, the slow, subtle arc and twist of her naked shoulders outward, twirling, floating, flying, outward and down, slicing unexpectedly, swallowing her reflection, toes pointing to the last, the aching, unruffling pause before, exploding up, smiling, laughing to herself, to the raft, to that hot moon, dusky August day. And she turns suddenly, racing toward the reaching branched shore tree. The boy now unfolds his sitting to sprint, thumping and springing out quickly over creek water, spraying strokes pushing in pursuit of the laughing hare, reaching toward the rooted wild grass bank. She grabs the knotted rope past the thick trunk, up the dirt path to pausing, deep breath jump, holding, hanging, swishing beyond trunk and path, whistling wildly over grassy bank, then water, then over the boy, half out of the creek, caught in a broadening smile of awe and appreciation, watching the arcing girl as she sails, then dances on her smooth watered reflection. I am an open water swimmer and swim daily from May to October. Swim in Lake Kitchewit today. I'm a big fan of Mary Oliver, and she died in January 2019. And in September of 2019, I had experienced at Walden Pond that reminded me of her famous poem, The Summer Day, where she is holding a grasshopper in her hand that is eating sugar. This is a response poem that I call The Late Summer Day from Mary Oliver. Halfway across Walden Pond, the mid-September sun, bright above the tree line, reflects off the smooth surface and warms my squinting face as I swim, my hands reaching gently through the clear water of this late afternoon. The thickness of woods along the shores holds me in its arms as I turn to swim back towards sandy shore and the old wooden bathhouse basking in light with a speckle of old swimmers and beach chair readers. Floating in the water just ahead of me, a small stick or piece of trash distracts me until closer I see the light green body, the orange stripe, and the small legs of a grasshopper, motionless. How did she get here, far out in the middle, with no grass or land in sight? No boats today, with a fisherman who may not have noticed a quiet stowaway. And how have the trout, bass, and pickerel missed this tasty morsel? I reach to cup its body in one hand, water draining through my fingers to see and feel the hair-like front legs and feathery body, until it jumps, alive suddenly. How? Landing just ahead, back on the water. I'm the only island in sight, I think, and slower this time. Cup my hand and lift, gently carrying her toward the top of my head, where she steps on, clinging to my wet hair. Holding my neck and head as still as possible on the long swim in, I feel her move through my hair, climbing to higher ground perhaps. And I wonder what she sees from her perch with those enormous and complicated eyes, and whether Mary Oliver ever carried a grasshopper on her head. As my feet touch sand, my head rising with its passenger, I walk slowly out of the water, across the sand, past toweling swimmers and a curious child, up to the stone-walled ledge, where I bow my head to the thick blades of green beyond, feel the small snap of her back legs, and see her fling herself back into the grass. I'm a fan also of James Wright's poetry, and he was a big fan of the ancient Chinese poets who liked long titles. This is a very short love poem with a very long title. It's called Finally Beyond the Pine-Treed Back Roads of My Morning Commute, I Think of You Early This September Morning. The bright sun kisses the cornfields that I pass, grown tall and stretched near to bursting, with plump kernels of sweetness within, golden gems that sparkle and spill out over the tops, yellow happiness dancing like fireworks against a green, stalked sky. Because of you, I too feel these golden gems, this yellow happiness, this full heart bursting into dance. I love being in the woods, hike nearly daily, and have joked with my students at Middlesex Community College often that I'm a tree hugger. And it was thinking about where that came from, wondering about that tree huggerness that led me to this poem and got me thinking back to a memory I had not thought about in a long time. It's called dendrophile, which means lover of trees. Dendrophile. They were our jungle gyms, our hanging bars, our hobby horses, our August cooling tents, our winter snow shakers, our climbing walls, our mountain tops, our citadels. They surrounded us as we ran, chasing each other, past their sappy bark, over pine needle thickened paths, the forest floor squishy with mulch, and the fibrous reaching roots of these silent sentinels standing watch over our boyhood selves as we grabbed for sticks at our feet, broken branches weakened by boring insects, chiseled by birds bashing their hungry heads, and cracked loose by the weight of winter, swinging and slamming these against trunks, snapping pieces that spun in the air, flying past ecstatic eyes, and nearly clipping our crew-cutted heads. And whose 6-year-old challenge was it that day, which set us attempting to climb pole-thin pines with their pencil-pointed stubs of branches long choked off by the thick canopy of green high above? Grabbing scratchy trunks, we stepped carefully, slowly, easing our weight onto one bone-dry stub, then another, the height competition continuing until a brittle crack to suddenly drop us tumbling to pine-needled floor. Then, unthinking, my sights on bragging rights, I reached up one stubbled trunk, hugging too closely its scratchy bark as I climbed until the crack, the sudden drop, the unseen sharpened stub slicing as I pole slid toward forest floor, a thin red line from my belly to chest. Afterwards, the stitches, the bandages, the long torso scar were show and tell exhibits until puberty and chest hair and decades erased any visible sign of that first woodland infection when sap began running through my veins. And I want to turn to a few newer poems. And I taught in 2 prisons about 30 years ago. And a few years ago, one of my former MCI students' cases began to be discussed more frequently in the news as people were advocating for the commutation of his sentence, which was natural life or life without parole ever. This led me to thinking back to those times, teaching in prisons, and to writing more about those experiences. This poem is a villanelle about that former student. It's called Prison Class. In any other culture, he'd be a prince, whispered the guest writer I'd brought to prison that night, knowing of his poor court-appointed defense. A bright high school athlete with a mother from Port-au-Prince, he became a Marine to keep college in his sights, though in any other culture, he'd be a prince. On leave, his warning shot above the bat-waving mob was self-defense, fleeing a party detonated by a racial fight. But his was a poor court-appointed defense. Inside gray walls, the young man spoke with quiet confidence of Welty, Faulkner, Baldwin, and Updike. I felt in any other culture he'd be a prince. At trial, no ballistics that might have proved his innocence, but a white man was killed that night. A shame about the poor court-appointed defense. Decades he's been behind walls ever since the judge gave him natural life. In another culture, he might have been a prince, but instead he got a poor court-appointed defense. Last year, Wendy Drexler, the poet, and Cambridge visual artist Connie Sames conceived of a project involving collaborations between poets and visual artists, pairing them up. Over the past several months, I've been collaborating with Somerville artist Matt Carano, who is here today. I've been writing ekphrastic poems in response to his paintings, and he has been creating paintings in response to my poems. This poem is in response to Matt's painting titled River Sunset. My poem is called Dark Edges. Summer evenings bring darkness at the edges, jagged, uncertain of extended days, riverbanks of trees turning swampy, hiding herons, egrets, eagles, coaxing loon laughter, chirping like frogs in shallows, nudging boats at their moorings, their specks of red and white nearly lost beside cooling wooden docks that hint of houses beyond, listening for sleepy laps along mossy shores and whispers of memoried residents beneath and beyond the river's dreamy reflections. And I will end with a poem about going to a poetry reading. In Japan and Korea, the term skinship is used to name that importance of physical touch between the baby and parent. And then that term has expanded to this connection throughout our lives. It's called skinship. Beacon Street made way for us, walking this evening to the bookstore. Inside, we take our seats in the crowd, spaced for social distance. The venerable poet steps to the podium. Her new poems grab and weave through Paris streets into smoky Beirut cafes of exiles and refugees, past shawarma, jamon cups of halib mahal. But the after warmth of you is fading. My hand wants your fingers, the warmth of your lower back curving against me. Thank you.
Well, hello, everyone. That was wonderful. It's really nice to hear other readers read their poems with such conviction. That was really beautiful, and nice to be in the front row as well. Thanks everyone for being here tonight. Thanks to my fellow readers and to James for communicating with me via email to set this up and all that good stuff, and to the Grolier in general. Good to see everyone here tonight. I'm going to be reading from my first book of poetry is called Moon Grammar. And I'm going to be reading from that one. There was an allusion in that wonderful introduction, which thank you for that, to an angel figure. And there is an angel figure in the poems. I sort of imagine what would happen if an angel were to sort of comment on our foibles and our glories too, you know. And so there's a bit of that. So the opening poem is The Angel Speaks. Even from here, I've come to know you. My kind disapproves of my interest. They call me exoticist, colonizer. You know better. You, standing still in the garden with an idle shovel leaned against your thigh, entranced by the jay's squawk, by its movements as it carries sunlight on its wings into the darkening elm boughs. And you on the subway car, regarding the frozen tunnels with sympathy, with recognition of a familiar pressure, of mutual suffering as the train lights shove the dark forward. Most of my kind, when they come, take pleasure in blinding you, in watching you fall to your knees. But I am here to say, get used to the light. I'll read a couple of angel poems. This one is sort of an angel poem in a way. This one is At Taroko Gorge. Taroko Gorge is a marble gorge in Taiwan on its eastern shore. I taught English there for a year and spent some time in somewhat surreal fashion riding a motorcycle through Taroko Gorge. It's a really beautiful place. This one has an epigraph from the Gospel of John. He said to them, "What are you looking for?" And if you thought immediately that the he was Jesus, you'd be right. At Taroko Gorge. Gripping the shallow riverbed, the cliff stretches upward, its sinews brimming with shifting tones of light and dark that empty into the silver sky where they end, if they end. Mike and I drove serpentine roads through the gorge all morning, parked to hike a path snaking out of sight. We saw what we knew of sanctity in jade water polishing the marble channel, in the monkey crossing the road, ducking under a guardrail into deep green foliage. A trickster god, I said, off to pester one of the penitent tourists shuffling through lookout gazebos domed like cathedral naves. We reached a temple at the top. From the peaked roof, a bell hung, its waist engraved with dragons, its lip guarding the clapper dangling in the center like a tongue. We stretched for the rope. My fingers grazed it. Mike grabbed hold. We held it high together, then released. The gorge's throat pronounced the transgression as we fled our guilt down slope like children. At the bottom, overlooking the calabash curve of the river, Mike said he'd never believed in ghosts or gods, laughed, took off his shirt to feel what was left of the sunlight. But on the drive home, we called the site Eden, Jordan, water of awakening, as if we could only know it through myth. We cut through the cliff's shadows, past gazebos abandoned by tour buses, into the flickering marble polish of river, until the ancient quiet muscled us out. If actuality matters at all, that person's name is John. But if I had named the person John, then it would have seemed like the writer of the Gospel of John was in the poem. So I had to make it Mike. His middle name is Mike, so it works. John Camilleri, for those who know. All right. This next poem is set in Lubbock, Texas, where I went to graduate school for some time. And as the poem will make clear, it's a bit of a hostile environment. in every way. Lubbock, Texas, and West Texas. A little tough to live there. What I always said to myself is, I'm surprised that it's almost as though nature is at all times reminding people that it probably wasn't a good idea to settle on the Cap Rock. But they stay, and we stayed. Fox and Dust. Last night, crossing the park, A gray fox stared me down from under a streetlight, then disappeared with 3 curled leaps out of the isolated glow into the dark. I don't belong here any more than cedar elm or Afghan pine or the bur oaks, their branches winded into jagged lines. I think of Joseph, that is Old Testament Joseph. I think of Joseph, who saw in the seclusion of dreams what provincials hate most, a destiny set apart from the rest, and love for a foreign land and its people. The Arabic word habub frightens some more than the storm itself. Cotton is Arabic too, cultivated here for generations. Crimson as well, the right epithet for West Texas sunsets. The day after the fox stole into solitude, I lay in my house, watching out the window as the sky of the over the caprock rolled up into a wall of dust and dirt. What light did Joseph see, drawn up from the dark, speckled with blood and spittle? Sunlight stumbles in oak branches, debris curls and leaps like something living. In the swirling filth, a pair of eyes, the fox's, like 2 dislodged stars or cast dice, not reborn, just still there, floating in the terror. What ground will I stand on come morning? I should have said that a haboob, it's a very funny word. It's a real word. A haboob is a dust storm, a wall of dust that sort of, it's apocalyptic. It's really apocalyptic. And I thought, that's the moment where I thought, people settled here. This is interesting. So it's one idea. I have a couple of poems set in Greece. After my time at Boston University, I was able to go on a global fellowship and spend some time in Greece. Some of my companions here know a little bit about this. Anyhow, this poem's about, it's actually very clear what it's about from the title, but it's about a ram skull that we found on a hilltop wired into an olive tree. It's one of the creepiest things I've ever seen. This is a sonnet, kind of. On a ram skull in an olive tree. Something of Carcosa on a Greek hilltop, the hollow socket a pit the devil bored for our gaze as our eyes level with the rim, study the shape of the rot. At the lipless mouth, our legs go to jelly, branches click against the skull, the nostrils twin water drops hang, floating fossils out of time, fruit of olive underbelly. A church lies bone white in the town below us, but here our eyes consume other flesh, a victim, not spotless, but dry, caked with mud and dust. Our tongues quiver as we descend, a symptom of feral faith extracted from that tree. Old world knowledge, bitter, pagan remedy. Felt like something living from another time, you know, it was pretty cool. There might have been some animal sacrifice going on this hill, which was so fascinating to me that I wrote 2 poems about it. So here's the next one. Bone Faith. We'd hounded the sacred throughout Greece, among the moldered columns at Delphi, in the empty lustral basin at Knossos, through countless barren village churches with their glut of icons and incense. We found the elusive quarry hung in an olive tree on a Cretan hilltop, a ram's skull, its lipless mouth stretched into a grin, dry leaves clicking against the hollow bone, all of it smeared with mud, even the rusted wire gnawing at the spiral horns. Totem, crucifix, we put our eyes in its sockets. From its vantage, took in the decrescent hills cowled by clouds, by clusters of tamarisk and cypress. Below, among the blood-brown roofs of houses, a church lay, like a hunk of bone tossed into the valley. That very morning we had disturbed its old air. As we descended from that height, quiet as dust, our shadows pooled and ran down slope. Our tongues tingled as we coughed on sunlit dirt and left the skull, unclassified, unnamed, marinating in the blank sunlight. Well, friends, I've been working to translate these poems into Italian with a native speaker. I'm a beginner in Italian, but I'm working with a native speaker at Berkeley where I teach. It's actually a student and a really wonderful human being. My Italian heritage is very important to me. My parents are here, which is thrilling to say in front of them. And some of these poems are set in Italy. I'm not going to read a poem in Italian. I wanted to, but I'm not going to. This is from her diary, Venice. The heavy cicada song pouring from the cypresses lulled your head to my lap, the hum so dense it muffled the knock of laborers in the nearby church. With your hair gathered in sweaty bunches above your t-shirt collar and mine stuck to my shoulders, we rose and searched for Pound's grave, drawing together, then apart through the rows of headstones, pausing to note dates, famous names, behind dry bouquets bound by black twist ties. I read aloud in front of his simple gravestone. The roots go down to the river's edge and the hidden city moves upward. And you listened. Then you read as I moved about, half dancing with the verse, to carry our news to them that dwell under the earth, like a priestess possessed or just very hot. You stuck the cantos back in your bag and we moved on past the soft-stepping Franciscans who still tend San Michele in Isola, past those laborers banging on something within the church. St. Michael, you joked, wrestling a soul trying to escape from hell. By the entrance, a vaporetto waited to ferry us across the lagoon toward the smell of sewage and pizza, toward the city of marble. It is sinking, we always hear in the news, forever sinking into the earth, but from our low view on the water, it rose and rose until it covered the sky. I really hope Venice doesn't sink. It would be really awful. But there are a lot of awful things. Okay, friends. I'll read a few more poems. Thank you so much for listening and for being here. This is really special. This is a special venue, as everyone knows who's here. And I sort of can feel that. Where else are there this many books of poetry on walls? You know, it's awesome. This is the title of this poem is in Italian. It's Colma d'oblio. It means full of oblivion or full of forgetfulness. And this poem is after Petrarch, after Wyatt, and after John Berryman, who all did version. Well, there's the original Petrarch, and then there were versions. Here's another version. Colma d'oblio. No one bothered to ask me if I wanted to steer this damned ship loaded with mnemonic objects, brushes, lockets, tufts of their hair, my lovers, bunched like bouquets with pretty knotted ribbon. Look at the oars of this thing. They're not winged, churned by manpower only. Moist wind. The insulted tempest bats its lashes and the sea heaves. Raindrops, tears, sails, shrouds. Where are the lamps that clever woman wrought? Where's the reason? Port, oh, port, I would surely find you somewhere in the gloom if only you were not a heaving beast hunched in brine and hungry. That is an intentional pun on my last name. Port, oh, port. I brought that poem to the BU workshop, actually. It's one of very few that made its way through that program and through other things and into this book. Very, very few. But they loved it so much that there was port in it. And they just got such a kick out of it. And it kind of won me over to something that I thought was sort of silly. Anyway, very good. A couple more poems. This poem is set in Austin, Texas, and is dedicated to Shay, my ex-wife, sort of. Love song, Austin, Texas. You lower the straw from your latte, leave a drop on the arm of the chair for a bee, and a repeated movement begins, circular hovering, then linear descent, vibrato of wing, a droned note, silence feeding, your eyes shifting from the insect to my face, your eyes and mine wet as the bee's tongue, because these are the sorts of things we tear up over, sappy scenes of nourished life. Turf hill descending to patio, grackles picking at feather grass, and the skyscraper shadows animato with pedestrians. In the distance, the 360 bridge bends over the lake like a fermata on a musical score. Pause, rest. The lulled scene lasts until the bee is sated. It flies off toward its comb, where what you'd given it proliferates in each hexagonal, murmurous cell. She really liked feeding insects. It was fascinating to me. Oh, there were insects fed in one of your, in the Mary Oliver poem, and an insect on someone's head as well. Luckily, the bee didn't land on our heads. That would have been less, we would have had less tender feelings toward it. All right, friends. I'll read two more. I think I might have lied with the number I said before. This poem is an Easter poem, and it's back to the angel. The last two poems will sort of return a little bit to the angel's voice. This is called Easter Magdalene. Mary Magdalene, as you might recall, discovers the empty tomb and runs off to tell everyone about Christ having risen. Easter, Magdalene. As I approached the tomb, I saw two lights lifted against the dawn. My sight wavered, then clarified. I saw two great wings from a young man's back, then came closer until his smooth features were clear. At my age, I see every young person as my own helpless child. The stone this one gripped outsized and outweighed him by a ton. Its shadow was draped across his bare shoulders. I thought of his hands absorbing the cold stiffness of the stone's face as he clenched the edge and heaved. He moved the stone with ease and stood before the tomb's chill without a shudder while I drew my garments tighter around me. There was the miraculous emptiness, the burial shroud. Will I be forgiven for remembering best the otherworldly gray of the angel's eyes, the strange twist of his pink mouth? Running back to town with the news, I glanced back and stumbled. I swear he delayed his flight to watch me go. What if angels liked earth better than heaven? That's all I wanted to ask myself, you know? There's an epigraph to the book, effectively to that effect. I mean, it comes from Thomas Mann. To the angels, God's creation of a living world of good and evil and his concern for it seems some sort of majestic whim that nettles them, for they assume, probably more rightly than wrongly, that behind it lay a weariness with their psalm-singing purity. Constantly hovering about their lips are amazed and reproachful questions like, "What is man, O Lord, that you are mindful of him?" Like, why do you care about these guys so much? You know, it's kind of fun. Anyhow, thank you very much for listening. This is my last poem. This one's called Epigon. An epigon is like a person who follows a greater predecessor and is a lesser version of that. Maybe in a moment of doubt, I called myself Epigon. So this is Epigon, the latecomer. Let me be the latecomer, arriving when most of the guests are well asleep. So all that's left to do is pick up the pieces, all they scattered on the wine-stained ground. The hero's grave bulldozed, the gorge guarded and shut, the desert ground too hot to walk on, warred over, all columns moldered, all churches mystiqueless, and the flat open land, fox turf, land of warped trees, not of people, wells not for drinking. Beside them, the angel's wings dropped to earth, obsolete as our tailbones and appendices. Crow-ruled our lives go on, fearful, fitful. Some light, it's true, makes it to us, but always refractory, errant, struggling to deign downward. It is given us incomplete, a ripped edge of bread, or brave, reaching from lamps that mark the edge of town to illuminate, for a moment, a small green room. Thank you very much.
How are y'all? Good to see everybody. Thanks especially to James and Dan. It's lovely to be here at Grolier, a place that I visited frequently many years ago when I was at BU. It's great to be back and to see friends and students in the audience and so many friends living and dead on the walls. I'll be reading tonight 6 poems from my new book, In Ghostlight. The first one, you don't need to know much, I think, as background, but it may help to know a couple of things. First, we have Beowulf fans. Fans of Beowulf in the house? Yeah, okay, give me something. Oh. Everybody remembers, Grendel and the arm and everything. So you may not recall this bit, but Hrothgar, the king, his mead hall is called Hjaret. So this poem takes its title from Hrothgar's mead hall, Hjaret, and the form of the poem is the alliterative hemistich, which was the form of Beowulf. Hjaret. It is creeping across the withered back country, where grim fogs graze hills and gray mists hug the hollows that haunt our forsaken highways. It lurches through thickets, downs leaves, downs limbs. It strips the bronze stalks of the harvest. It steals the firstling of the flock to gladden its feeding. In a ditch by our fence, they found Doc's daughter. The bale fires burn. Others are butchered. Groped by our grief, in the grizzled air we have shrieked lamentations, longing for a law to punish the predator and make firm a peace. All the high councils have condemned the creature, and still it stands astride the county, cruel as winter, the cold's own kinsman. The nightly news repeats its nothing. Our Facebook friends cry wolf, unfollow us. It shakes its iron shackles in the shadows. It rattles its wrench over the roof gables. In the darkness outside our doors, it dances and will not wander from the farms it has wasted. The monstrous changeling, unchosen, our child. So for the next one, I would note that poets have been conspicuously silent on the subject of Kenny Loggins. And I wanted to remedy that. This poem is in a form I'll fudge and say I invented. I stole it from Paul Claudel, a French poet nobody reads anymore. He called it the verset claudelien. But basically, you take the rhyme scheme of an inherited form and you write very long lines. You break the syllabic count or the metrical count. So I call those will sonnets. Get it? Like sonnet and Wilson. It's ridiculous and silly. Feel free to laugh at me. This is the first of the 3 will sonnets in this book. It's called The Birth of Tragedy. It may help to know one other thing, which is the etymons of our word tragedy. Anybody know the Greek words it comes from? It comes from tragos, meaning goat, and oidos, meaning song. A tragedy is a goat song because at the Dionysian festivals where tragedy was invented, the winner who wrote the best play got a goat. The birth of tragedy. Funny story. I wasn't able to walk upright on my own too long before I found myself possessed by an urge to go outside and play. One rule, stay in the yard. So I'd twirl myself dizzy and fall, lisp highway to the danger zone, roll down the hill like a barrel, or teeter, clapping at lightning bugs. but in the yard I'd stay. What a good boy am I, I'd think. Jack Horner was good, not mean like that snot Georgie Porgy. Then, one day, the sky was wolves, and I was bad and alone. At first, my wooden rifle blew bad men without faces to smithereens in a petulant orgy of deathless death. And then I saw the farmhouse down the road by the pines. Then I was gone. October, and the field wild with broom and tares was a harmonious bronze sea, inwoven with quick patterns by slithering winds. I stumbled toward the happy white house on the remote hilltop, brandishing my toy. Arriving, though, I found porch steps broken, windows missing, and darkness inside. Sensing a coven of witches might be in there, waiting, watching, I scared, turned, bah! Face to face with a goat, I leapt from the porch and made the dirt road, running all the way home and filling the gray sky with shrieking and terror, the goat chasing and tears, and no one could hear me or help me not die. This next poem is called Fieldwork. And whenever I say that, a wise Enheimer in the audience always says, hey, you know, there's a Seamus Heaney book called Field. Yeah, I do. I do know that. This stanza of this poem is also from John Keats, for those keeping notes at home. Hopefully I have made those borrowings thematic. The only other thing, whenever I'm in a city, I have to ask this. Do people know what a post hole digger is? It digs post holes. That you might figure that out, right? I've always been struck by that. It's such a strange name. It's very particular. It does this one thing. Okay. So the poem is called Fieldwork. A post hole digger. Heavens. Just how tightly can sounds enclose a thing? Penning it into a function that, wrongly or rightly, isolates it from the infinite and nameless stuff of possibility, driving it down in the hard ground of time. Sky-minded summer. And for 3 whole days, the old man never says a word to me, as we repeat work's ancient paradigm over and over in the August blaze. What we were making was a phantom fence. From the night woods, wild things come to possess the fields they've lost to human violence and savvy, as the dark itself returns to bless the troubled mind with sleep. Then herds of deer, shy as dreams, graze the rows day's labor made, and woodchucks gorge themselves on cabbages. The ghostly bobcat and the fox appear, and timber rattlers, cooling in the shade, unfold like the nightmare that history is. It was to keep them out as best we could, and to protect the body's nourishment. We worked against that spectral brotherhood which summons us back to that place we went forth from, the reeling center, where the prey and predator move together in a dance like lovers, knowing neither fear nor rage, seeing what is without the shadow play of mind. That place which is our provenance on earth and is our earthly heritage. 6 feet apart, a grave's depth, we dug holes around the field, leaving dirt piles behind us as if we were really tunneling moles building a darkling home, our workings blind. But then came posts, and then the fence's wire. A shape emerged. Until our fingers numbed, we fastened lengths of fence wire to the wood, stretching it tight, till, like some antique lyre, when plucked by the high winds, the whole fence hummed. The task complete, the old man grinned, said, "Good enough." It was and wasn't. So things go. The fence stood 20 years, though you did not, grandfather. And I know now I can't know more than a few odd stories of your lot in life. You rarely spoke about your past, that drunken brute, your father, or the war. Today, the field is scrub pine and broom sedge. Within the green walls, you repent at last, as was your work and what you did it for. Still, nights, I sense you coming to the edge of consciousness with those dark ministers of the forgotten you strove to keep out. And here, within the cricket's pulsing whirs, your endless silence, like a voiceless shout imploring me with I can't understand what motive to do something different, to spare no pains and to spare no cost, but make whatever work comes from my hand, summon the quick back to that place we went forth from, and welcome from there the lost. I had a friend. We have lots of insects involved in our reading tonight. I had a friend and he's abandoned me in my time of need. Tragic. So I'll say three more. This next one, you never know. Baseball fans? Softball, baseball? Anybody play Little League? Baseball, softball? Okay, all right. So when I was growing up in Georgia, baseball was a big deal. And at Little League, basically, if you hit a home run over the fence, you were momentarily immortal. That is, for one Saturday, you were immortal. You were the talk of the Little League. Everyone loved you. They were buying you slushies and big league chew and bubble tape and rotting your teeth generally was what was happening. But it was great. And so I was never a small person. I know that because my nickname was Biggin, as in you see that Biggin, you know. But I had a friend. Who was a smaller guy, and one Saturday, it was his day, and we were on the same team, and beautiful home run, and so that's at the center of this poem, which is called Next Up. 1,000 miles and 20 years away from you. Light years, it seems. Before my class starts, one gusty early April day, I watch the phalanxes of students pass, hurrying through spectral clouds of their hot breaths. Some slapping fives, some reveling in crass jokes, others shouting out youth's shibboleths. Passionate, awkward, silly, as we were. They rush to kill exams and to their deaths, the way that people do. Days, weeks, months blur. Hours chase each other round and round the clock. And years thumb through a lifetime's calendar like an old Yellow Pages, just to chuck it out. Someday, these students may be feeling what I do now, that mere survival's luck. Watching the year's first cherry blossoms, reeling through the spring's glacial air, pale galaxies, revolutions, and fast forward. huge gusts wheeling phantom flotillas into maelstrom seas. Not everyone has had the luck I've had. I see you and your friends, the fake IDs I got you, and you'd wanted them so bad. Lord, you were proud and happy with your beer at 18. And I see your tough guy dad weeping beside your coffin the next year. I glimpse us playing catch, just little kids, wincing, Saturday's brush-stroked sky sincere, or racing through the twilight katydids pulsing, or stealing off into the woods to smoke and brag. Whatever age forbids, we sprinted after, like Earth's only goods. So young, we dreamed only of being older. While your dad, a good man, roofed our neighborhoods, we couldn't warm to homes where hopes grew colder with comfort. Friend, you've won the last of races. Kids older than you ever were, now shoulder fashionable burdens. Blossoms in our faces, like ghostly avalanches, are cascading, and there you are, you're 12, circling the bases as fast as possible, the bright ball fading out of blue sky into dark trees like some untutored sun that seeks out its own shading. Crowd roaring in the moment's astrodome. Brief hero, sunlight's warmth against your neck. Spring blossoms fall. It's summer. You cross home and reach out for me where I stand on deck. This next one I wasn't going to say, but I heard Matthew's fine Venetian poem. This is a Venice poem as well, so maybe I'll say this one, and then I'll close out with a short one. Maybe a couple of things that might help to know. In Venice, there's a law that makes it illegal to feed pigeons. So that's important to this poem. And also Napoleon loved Venice after he conquered it, of course. But he called Piazza San Marco Europe's drawing room. So that's important. Also mentioning San Michele with Ezra Pound, you know, that they're out there because of Napoleon, right? Yeah. I think that's all that we need as background. Yeah, sure. Okay. Disobedience. Here at the labyrinth's heart, I find the air is scintillant, just like the postcards show. A dream of light and strict geometries. Where the lagoons receded from the square, gray stones are dazzled with a blinding glow, and crowds wait, wincing in the shimmer's freeze, like marble, waiting for some word or spell to conjure limbs to life from lifeless stasis. Or nomads, stunned to find a sudden well amid the endless sands, or an oasis. I feel it. Nightly angst, ennui, and gloom refine the human need for some perfection, some otherwhere, outside routine's dark delves. And here we are, in Europe's drawing room, Napoleon's choicest spot. Sun glare's reflection in cafe windows, we can't see ourselves at all, which is, I guess, why we worked out ways to scrounge up the cash, made plans, and took the flights. We've dreamed the us we've dreamed about awaits us here. But no, not here. See, look, Campanile cracked. Venetians flee en masse. The ones stuck here hawk trinkets. For a coin, tourists go chattering by St. Mark's bones and maybe stop a second as they pass, thinking of their rivals back home in Des Moines, to snap some well-posed selfies with their phones. Outside, a blizzard of chivalric white, the seagulls swarm, whirling in clean white air, and then descend like jagged shards of light to peck to death a pigeon in the square, removing flesh until, pink as a tongue, the innards show. The passers-by ignore the wound, the bird. But there's a girl with bread, one not too busy being rich or young, crouched in the square, small, casting morsels for the living ones. A saint, I almost said. It is illegal here to feed a pigeon, yet she does, quietly, sure that the law, which holds the bottom lines, the true religion, shall not expunge this world's dark, winged flaw. The last one I'll read is called The Problem. It's another of the Will sonnets. Please laugh at that every time I say it. I mean, it's just awful. I don't know what to call it. Like, it's just a thing. The poem is for a friend of mine, my dearest friend, who right after the birth of his second daughter, he had a brain tumor. It was discovered, and he had chronic heart failure. And then they discovered tumors all over his body. And the doctor said that the tumors were hot, which is, I don't know, y'all are smarter than I am. I think that's code for bad. I don't know. But it seemed like time was very short. And so I wrote this poem for him. It's the last poem in the book, The Problem. Maybe I'll say another thing because I'm a nerd. All my nerds here. We have classic scholars, Greek and Latin. Absolutely no one ever anywhere. That's okay. All right. So the poem, the genre of the poem is a propempticon. Everyone knows the propempticon. You're all busy writing propempticons at home. But in case you've forgotten, the propempticon is a poem for someone going on a voyage, right? Everyone knows the valediction, right? Like Donne's valediction. That's when he's leaving. The propempticon is somebody else is leaving. The problem. Some grouse. Some rattle ice in stormy cocktails. Some read or stare into their hands' artificial glow. The good-natured, whom no one likes, make conversation. Kids kick seat backs. Babies scream. This is the part where you find out exactly who you are, as much as you will ever know, crammed like seeds into this invaluable lemon with all the dreamed escapes you cannot help but dream. There's something wrong, some unspecified glitch, but nobody will say just what it is, keeping you stranded among strangers here on the hot tarmac, waiting for some pronouncement, some true words that will explain your prolonged absences from the air above the clouds, from flight, from the oceanfront destination everyone's anticipating. It will not last forever, your time on the ground. At some point, there will come a departure. Then, clouded skies will recede like sunshine, like questions, like your toddler's sticky touch. And you will be wholly invisible to the earthlings you love. who love you. An arrow shot by some blind archer beyond the endless traffic and grocery store pharmacy lines, long distance calls and doctors wincing thoughtlessly. For now, take solace in the presence of the known world's flawed, forgettable, flightless things. Bless the engine's troubled heart, the brief and inexplicably beautiful problem with the wings. Thanks. There's nowhere to go, so I just own the stage now.
We have some books for sale. Poets will be signing books, and everyone could please put your chairs up against that wall or that wall. That would be greatly appreciated. Thank you for coming on this very hot day.
Love that last
Oh, thanks so much.
childhood memories of the farm, all that. Animals.
Worker that really works from the soil is divorced from itself. First, is the turn at the end of the road. That's. They're different. That's we're looking at the photos, right? And we also know that. I don't know how to turn that off, so everyone's just gonna do what we're saying.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just the paintings that Matt has, it's a farm painting and poem about that. I mean, it's stuff like, but it's that monotony of rows and all sorts of changes over time, generationally and soil. It's a beautiful read. Thank you. Thank you so much, Fred. Beautiful read.
Let's go down with water.
Yeah, yeah.
So you have
We gotta have our.
Not gonna be back in Boston.
I met you at chaos. Yeah, for you. Or whatever you call it. And Ryan, you know what?
I do, from Facebook.
Yes,
Zena Gomez.
yes. And I wanted to tell you something.
Oh.
Well, you were, it switched you from way back.
Oh, there you go. You're immortalized. I'm immortalized. That's fantastic.
I'm trying to get myself into.
Be present, be in the moment, be what is most.
Yeah, so the photos and all that, but there you go.
That's the most flattering image of me, but yes, Zena. So thank you. Please share that widely. That's the best. Oh, yes.
Early today, I was at the garden museum, so.
Yeah, I saw it. He's reading.
Yeah. Memory talks a bit about-
I didn't know that. Tell me about it. You're saying it's not really about, it's like about how she already has the real direct.
She was my idea, but also meditation. Author into it, so try to a bit too much mind, but it's a fascinating concept, and it does go by what So kind of makes sense.
Shoot me a note if you think I should read it. My reading is small, but if you think it's very good.
Yeah, but Barton is my favorite. Yeah, well, when I was in high school, I was there in Boston in 1982. So just. So.
Yeah.
And so I would always be signed to go to the museum. It's like I missed my opportunity.
Valentina Sergio, the MFA didn't do it.
I actually really love my first right there was built in
Yeah, it's nice.
Yes.
Hi there. I don't know about that. Like the Mance, I heard. The mountain, the mountain. I thought I heard the Mance, and I was like, you know, why have I not been invited to the Mance? Whatever that is. I feel like I wasn't good enough to do the function, but the whole thing. But I heard about in our meter. I'm very sorry. Only it doesn't come. Yeah. Just be open and listen, and that's it. You don't have to worry about the next one. So I'm engineer. Are you down the road? You're not here. Nice. I mean, I know about this. Your base spot.
Yeah.
I'm never on there, but whenever I'm on there, I there was a vacation.
Mary was my classmate. Yes, correct. I know. Look, man, I gotta get you past it. And I'm just like, I'm not letting it go. I gotta do something. I need to respond. Oh, God.
Like one of my friends. I was in the back. And, like, to everyone else, like, it's not awesome. I only have. So I gave it to him.
I know, I got away. I got away from my jail. When you were at our apartment. Yeah. Get your. Are you in poetry then, or what do you think happened first year against your will?
Well, it's a long story. I Georgia.
Yeah.
I really liked it. So the next month, we're not gonna have a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Anthony Hicks. What about that? Absolutely.
So anyway,
I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it. Thank you very much.
I asked him. Yeah.
Absolutely. I got it. That was really beautiful. Thank you so much. That is Paul. Thank you. I have mixed feelings on that. That's hard to follow, maybe. I'm not sure. Excuse me, I'm gonna so that's very nice to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
$5.
Take a quick program and then back to the side. Between common. And then we're gonna borrow you in a second. Yeah. I look really short. Beautiful. Okay, Dan, you wanna jump in there?
Sure. Do I gotta do this? I'm gonna take myself with a vert right thing right now. Horizontally. Yeah. That hairy chest.
All right, look at Danielle first.
Okay.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, now, excellent job. Okay, 3 more. Paparazzi. Excellent. Excellent.
Go with the scowl for me. It's more my vibe. Okay, let's go.
Never felt so nice. Alright, very good. A great pleasure. Are you gonna take cards? No, my parents.
Oh, you're
They're
gonna-
gonna tell me about it.
Well, Chris has my look.
We'll do that. Yeah, the instance of. So he is waiting outside.
So it's the we trying to like, so Joshua has one, James Smith has one. I make groceries, I pray for the MFA program and for everything. I think I'm well over it. I'm probably actually close to this, but anyway, I prayed on every single one. And then I pray for all the Joshua and James, you actually get to choose the color because it was a surprise. It was a surprise. No, it's on dressing. And a lot of these I may get notifications. No, this is great, and I'm still. It is fine, and he's like a manly man, so. No, you don't.
Fiction as a class here about. Yeah. Shame is taking.
All right, so, no, they did that. Yeah, that's what to me. It's fine.
And.
Okay.
So, and the last done, the kitchen.
Oh, I forgot. Yes, he did. He did the video. That's right. And he did a version that James was there. And so they was having a somebody called.
Oh.
I chastised young ones.
Well, Elijah also done that with James, home as well. And VIN.
I got it.
I wrote this published in James.
Oh, my God.
I mentioned it.
I know.
LISS.
LIS.
I'm good.
I actually gave you guys my last cards too. I did. I made part. I have them hidden everywhere. Here we go.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He did hear that. They lost some and they actually want to change color. Yeah, they did two. They did Rock and they did Ambition. And in Ambition, they have books. So I had actually, but I was like, I just got the copy of it. And oh, I don't think like
The collective.
I brought the collected works, yeah. And I have to give sense for my employees.
you're an employer. Oh, look at that name.
I'm excited to see the second edition of this that I hear is coming. No.
Oh, I can read it to you. So anyway, this is, it's ambition. I was like, I'm gonna retreat while they're doing your poem. And, he said, there's a typo on that sheet, messes up the meter. I said, oh no, where is it? Swinging it down pencil. Because somebody, like he reads all it, he doesn't take anything for granted, like he reads through everything.
He's so crazy. Maria Ellen, she was just a sweetheart. That she had copies of his, some permanent things. She had the first edition and he made a lot of changes.
Yeah.
And on Facebook, I don't know if you saw it, but he wrote, burn them all. I'm not kidding. I was like, I'm
Wait a second, somebody got to it.
no, this is you.
I know, indeed. My hand on that is abysmal.
That's why you were signing a lot. That must have been last year at,
Well, so much depends on the grip of the pen.
yes.
With the
Oh,
right
yeah,
pen,
down
it's
at-
almost legible. With the wrong pen, no.
I buy so many, I have this. One of my old dogs, and I got it from HR things, so I wrote to them and said, I'm a writer, where did you get these pens? I want more. And they said, oh, we ordered them from this company, here's the number. So I. Talk about being treated, and they said, well, unfortunately, they're no longer made. And the lady said, but I have told them all this stuff. But they're all gone.
Yeah.
The best kind of just wrote perfectly, it's a ball, kind of really draw them.
Here's my, like, to-do list.
No, that's not.
Mine is probably on a piece of paper in here somewhere, and I'll have to find it again unless I read these, which I will.
Yeah, my pens, I actually got this black Japanese paper, and I use a special fountain. I have,
You're already reading Jeffrey Hill.
it's interesting. Yes, did you study?
I missed him by a few
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm gonna head out.
Thank you for coming.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yes,
That group that I actually had. So, yeah, 21, 19, that's she's going to do 9. So, yeah. And it right now.
I don't all the things Andrew said of me.
And if you want, Christmas card, and Joshua gets one, James gets one. And you'll have a new address, I think. Your house. Are you there?
No, I'm moving next week. Oh, yeah, so really have to say, I'm just residency. And then I'm back for 3 days and then. I'm ready to be in conference.
Yeah. And you have, Brian Roder. Yeah. So that was right before the literary.
It's Baltimore, it's their
Wow.
year in Cleveland, back about then back in Maryland, in Houston,
We should take a picture.
I don't know, I mean, like, I feel like I'm.
On the draw.
I'm making a Right?
Okay. So there's James.
Hiding out in Michigan. So it's like that.
James and oh, gosh. That article that came in.
The whole long person.
Oh, tomorrow, yes, yes, oh, yes.
Yeah, no, I saw it.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, and I sort of kind of like mocking them. And but I had to kind of temper it, but I realized that
And my kids went to school.
I was there with them. So I have to hold I have to figure out myself. If I'm going to be really
That's where
comprehensive
they
in that
teach
team. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're saying that like, I think that's very fine to say that. I totally, but like,
So it actually was like. So
Tangled by 700.
Over here. I was upset, but then I was.
I still like.
Yeah.
But what's that song? You know, I wish it was still in press also.
Yeah. Well, I don't find them rather than later.
But anyway,
Yeah.
so.
No.
Here.
They don't ignore it. By.
Oh, that's not.
That I'm really.
Parts.
Yeah, it's gonna be cool.
Yeah, have you ever tried these?
I did, yeah.
I've been reading William
I was up
Johnson.
as well. I
And
while they were kind
the
of figuring
metaphysical
out.
poets.
But yeah, I'm not. Yeah, very.
Really?
Like seeing on the.
Because James had mentioned that. So he
Yeah,
said.
very aligned.
He's
That's
a.
fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
We're
only-
I found that, yeah, it's out there.
And Sarah Cortez has mentioned she's so close to my community. We talk all the time. Like, yeah, she told me about she reads it. So when I joined CLA, in our secret, like, and Cameron Nichols Smith was in there, Stephanie Sullivan, not household, author Philip Laughlin. Yes, he's there. That more than the group was in the end. And then I just first in.
I remember a phrase once in a while, like, I'm not.
Anyway, team play, sorry, I didn't mean to.
I think that's something like. It's very important. Because I mean.
And I really like this room. Something, I always try to figure out who will take unique color. I was thinking about it, it's like an emergency, break glass, get you. Oh. So yeah, it's just a lot of fun.
And I just, I already, I don't know.
Anyway, I should get back to you.
Yeah, yeah. Very good. You can't really take it.
Yeah.
Because he never takes himself serious. Yeah.
Got 1 and 3. 1 and 3. Yeah, I'm missing 2. You're missing 2.
Not a completed.
It is. No. That was great. I love that. Are you must be in the poetry scene. Yeah. I guess you will.
No, I have not.
Eric so just to see, so I got you there, just, you never know.
Yeah, I actually, I was in, Matthew's, graduate school.
Oh, what year were y'all?
We were, 2016.
Okay, so y'all were 8 years after you.
Oh, okay.
So who was there? So you had Robert, you had
We have Robert,
Carl.
Carl, and Maggie.
Oh, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good time. It's interesting because, you know, I think like a lot of people drawn to the program, I was like going there because I knew that Robert was there.
Yeah.
And, my wife and I were in Hopkins, California, and we had gotten like the national park pass, and we were just like trying to camp all the way back to the East Coast.
Nice.
And it was wonderful, but our first stop was to visit some friends in Porto, and we went to Powell's book.
Yeah.
And,
Oh,
and
yes.
Carl's entire crew was just
Yes, of course.
So I bought the whole thing and
Yes.
just like became a Carl convert on the way across.
Have you read Carl's interview in Literary Matters?
No.
Should. So, the magazine. We put this out day after. Yeah, it's all green. Everything on there. So, archive.
A member.
You don't have to have a membership.
No.
It is affiliated with ALSCW.
That's what I was.
So we paid our writers and we give it away for free online.
Oh, yeah.
I ran a few of this point. Oh, who are you thinking? You're talking about Carl Kurtzweg.
Yeah.
We also ran Carl Kurtzweg here. No, he's here too.
Yeah.
No, we did.
You know, a friend of mine just recommended. Jason Berry.
Yeah, I just saw Jason in Erie.
Did you?
Let's see, I ran 3 from Carl, looks like. Anyway.
Awesome. The small.
I'm just gonna write it into the thing here. But yeah, all right, so you came here for Carl Kurtzman. Wonderful.
Yeah. Well, I just came to really love his article as a course of our driving around.
Yeah.
I'm reading that and the changing lights.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, that's the best. I just wanted to say, like, I love your words.
Thank you so much.
Sincerely and truly. You know, a lot of times.
Yeah, no.
People are doing the work, that's great.
Yeah.
But you know, it's like, really, I don't know. I gotta work harder. It reminded me of the real work that can be done. Really just sounded strong.
Well, that is very inspiring, Eric, because that's what I am always telling my students and young people and writers. They don't show yourself. The worst thing you can do is say like, oh, that's good enough. No, it's not.
And a whole lot of.
That's right.
Always. Yeah. You were.
Yeah.
You as well. Such a small Boston writers.
He was an ambassador.
That's 20 there.